Hi everyone, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Boy, it is a windy day out here in my vegetable garden, but I want to plant Swiss chard and beets, and it's not too late to plant them, even though ordinarily I would plant them around April 21st or so. I just kind of got busy and forgot to put them in. The nice thing about both beets and Swiss chard is that they are really quite tolerant of the heat, so I'm not worried about the timing on them. However, I wanted to show you how I plant them and some important points about growing them because they are susceptible to a certain type of insect, and I have a way that is very simple to deal with them. So let's get started. There are a couple of things I wanted to point out before I start planting the seeds. First of all, I have already loosened the soil in this bed because I'm planting seeds, so I need to have the top few inches kind of loose, and that works really well for a seed bed. If you've seen my video on soil preparation, you know that I like to go really easy on the soil because I don't want to damage the structure in it. And so I just use my spading fork, wiggle it around a little bit kind of vertically in the soil, and that's all I do. This soil also has some compost in it. Now, if you haven't seen my video yet on soil preparation, you might want to check it out. And it will give you some good ideas of things you can do so that your garden is really fertile and productive. The next thing I did is I put our drip irrigation system on this bed. Now, I've been getting a lot of requests from folks for a video on drip irrigation, and you know, I'm not an expert on the subject, but I can certainly show you what our setup is in a future video. But I do want to point out that each of our raised beds has a valve on it so we can control the flow of water. And then we have this thing here called a manifold, and on it is drip tape. That's what we use for watering. And we have had it for several years now. It works great. It hasn't plugged or anything. So I've got that. There's 4 lines, as you can see. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant 3 rows here, here, and here of ruby chard, which is excellent, and then 5 rows of beets, and the variety of that one is cylindra. This is what Swiss chard seeds look like, although you'll notice that beet seeds look identical, and that is because they are from the same plant family. I'm just going to plant the seeds about 2 to 3 inches apart. And then if they germinate really well and some of them are too close together, then I'll thin them later. So this row, this one here, and I've got this stake in the middle of the bed just to remind me not to go into beet territory. So just 3 rows. Now these seeds need to be covered by about 1/2 inch of soil. And so all I'm doing is I'm just going to move in some of the excess soil from the sides of the trough to cover them. And then I always like to pat them down so they make good contact with the soil. It's a pretty quick process, as you can see. So here are the beet seeds. You'll notice they look identical to Swiss chard seeds. It's a good thing I have them in packets. So I'm going to plant 5 different rows and about the same spacing. Now beets, I've found, can be squeezed in a little bit more closely together. And if need be, I'll thin them apart once they get growing a little bit. I'll tell you what, these cylindra beets produce huge roots, and they are absolutely delicious. We love to roast them. They also need about 1/2 inch of soil coverage, so same drill. Pat them down. The next step is so important, and that is to water them in. Whether you're planting seeds or seedlings, You really want to water them in well. For one thing, the moisture will help the seeds germinate, and it also settles the soil around the seeds, or if it's a seedling, it settles it around the plant roots so that there aren't any air pockets. You'll recall I mentioned that there is an insect problem that I have an easy solution to. Well, beets, Swiss chard, and spinach are all members of the beet family, and they are all very susceptible to a nasty insect called the leaf miner. The adult is a fly. It lays eggs on the leaves, and then the maggots, hatch, and they tunnel through the cells in the leaves, and they ruin a stand of Swiss chard, beets, or spinach in nothing flat. It's awful. Well, there is such an easy organic solution to this, and that involves using floating row covers over the beds that have these crops in them. You keep it on for the entire season other than to harvest, and it acts as a physical barrier to keep those insects from landing on the plants and laying eggs. So here's what we do. We have flexible black plastic sprinkler pipe that is left over from a project many years ago. We made them into hoops for our beds. You'll notice this white pipe on the outsides of the bed, and what that is a 3/4 inch diameter piece of PVC pipe. This 1/2 inch diameter sprinkler pipe fits into it very easily, and this makes a nice hoop system for our bed. So now let me show you what floating row cover looks like. This is what floating row cover looks like. It is awesome. This is a lightweight fabric. It lets in air, sunlight, and moisture. If it rains, the water will go through it. It gives a few degrees of frost protection, but in this instance, the main thing I'm looking for is it to act as a barrier against these insects. So I am going to attempt to put this on the bed in this windstorm, so hopefully it won't be too comical. But I've bundled down one end to put over the end here. And then you just take the other end, here comes the wind, and bundle it together on this end. It's very important that you weight it down so that it does not blow off in a windstorm like this, because you certainly want to keep the insects away from the plants. But I love this stuff. If you take good care of it, it will last for years. Okay, I got this bed covered, and I wanted to give you a little tip as to how to custom fit the floating row cover to a bed. On this end, I bundled together some of the floating row cover and wrapped it with a rubber band. And then I came down to this end and did the same thing. It's kind of like if you're doing somebody's ponytail. It really keeps them on the beds. However, for added insurance, and I heartily recommend this, I have added a brick, a board, a brick, and a board, because once these plants are up and growing, the last thing that I want to happen is it to blow off and expose the plants to those pesky leaf miners. Now you'll notice in the background I've got two other beds that have floating row cover on them. I'm just giving them a little bit of protection from pesky birds. I really am not worried about an insect problem with those crops. So that'll come off in a few days when the plants are a little bit bigger. But the other instance that I use floating row cover for a whole season, just like these guys, is for cabbage family crops. So broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, kohlrabi, kale, etc. They are insect magnets. They can get aphids really badly, and they can get cabbage worms. Once again, those plants do not need to be pollinated, so I can cover the bed for the entire season, and it works beautifully. This is such a simple, organic solution to keeping insects away from the crops. I hope you found this helpful. I'll see you in a week.